All right, we're live. So we're about to start consolidating footage for After Effects. We're going to be editing a project and talking about that. And before we start, I'm just going to create a new folder for myself. And I'm just going to call this 12 Principles. All right. And then what I'm going to do in here is just start to put in, I've got this folder that has a bunch of stills from a project. So I'm going to put that in here. Anything that I want to use for that project. I've got this student project called Impossible Geometries. I'll put that in there. Got this giant worm thing I'll put in there. I've got a bunch of stuff that I want to add into this before I start. And if you want to add things later, you can definitely do that as well. Let's see, what do I have here? That's that one. I've got 2 ball bounces, I guess. I gotta rename this one. Okay. All right, so I've got everything in there. Everything's in here. These are the projects I'm going to use. It's easier to start this way than to go reverse. One thing about After Effects is it looks for paths, right? It doesn't save a file in the program file. It doesn't save the information. It looks for paths to things. So you have to make sure you have everything consolidated. And then what we're going to be doing is something like this. This is just an example of a student reel that was made where it has an introduction. It's got a little bit of audio. It's got some titling. And it just sort of goes through the group of projects. So for your project, you'll be doing 12 Principles of Animation. You can have a title page with your name. It would be helpful to label the animations so the viewer knows what they are. And also I know what they are when I'm grading. That's you. But this is the basic idea. We're just kind of creating a reel of our projects, showing each one, and then we'll be having some sort of finality or some sort of conclusion. So towards the end, we have the end, right? Music fades out, goes to black, and it's a pretty well edited project. So that's our ultimate goal for using After Effects. All right, so how do we use After Effects? When you open After Effects, you'll get something like this. And first thing to do is just to create a new project. All right. In the After Effects, what you're going to have is the composition plane, which just shows you where you're working. It has a timeline, sort of like when we were working with a timeline in Cinema 4D. And then over here you have your project palette where you can load in all your footage. So to begin with, what I will do is I will import a file. All right. So I'm going to go to my folder where I have my 12 principles. And when you're loading in an image sequence, you don't have to select all the files. So this is what I rendered out the other day. It automatically recognizes it as a PNG sequence because it knows that there's an order to the numeric order to the name. So make sure that that is checked on if it's not, and just click open. All right. So what that will do is it will, place the files in the footage here that you can start to work with it. And typically what I like to do is just simply take this and drag it down to this area called composition. There's a little button down here. It looks like a little, square, triangle, circle, and you just put it on here. And automatically what that's going to do is create a new composition out of your project. It's going to format it to the size that you rendered to and the length that you rendered to, all right? And then what you want to do is go up to composition and go to composition settings, and then just check out what you have. You should have a file that is 1920 by 1080. That's the preset that we're going to be working with. It's the HD footage parameters. And then down here you have the length. So this one is only 3 seconds long, all right? So I'm going to make this longer because our overall reel is definitely going to be longer than 3 seconds. So I'm just going to make this like a minute. So now it's a minute, 3 seconds. I hit OK. And now what I can do is if I click the space bar, I can see the footage play, okay? And it's just gonna kind of scroll through to the end. If I use this little button at the bottom that looks like a giant mountain range and a tiny mountain range, you can scale down to see your whole project. So this is what we have. This is our clip, and but our footage is much longer, all right? The blank footage is gonna be just black. So there's no, it's just like emptiness behind the scene. So what we do when we're editing is we can start to stack these up and create a timeline. So I'm just gonna import another one. And this is where you'll see if there are different sizes as well. I'm not sure what all my rendering sizes were. Let's do this ball bounce. Let's see what size it is. And then once you bring in another piece of footage, you can just literally drag it down here, okay? Now, when it puts it in, it's automatically gonna put it in at the 0 marker, okay? And so you're not gonna see it. After Effects is sort of like layers in Photoshop. The top layer is gonna be the one that you see, and the layer underneath is gonna be hidden by the layer above. So if I drag this one over, if I hit Shift, it will line up directly at the end of that one, and then I can see this footage. So notice this footage is a little bit smaller, right? Because I rendered it out at a smaller resolution. But ultimately, you should have all of your resolution be the same size. So everything should be rendered out to 1920, 1080. So now what I have is just a jump transition. So I'm moving from this one, and then it immediately goes into this one. And there's a little bit of extra time on this that then leads into this one, right? So again, more footage. Continue to go up to import file, and let's see what else we have here. Let's do this one. All right, this one's a little bit longer. There we go, smaller as well. Okay, so I've got 3 different pieces that I can start to edit. And ultimately what I want to do with this is start to think about how I can have some transitions, some pacing. One thing that's really great about working with the image sequences is you can bring in individual images as well. So let's say this one in the middle here, it's really short and it goes away really a lot, way too fast, right? So what I might want to do with this is actually import a still to have it start and stop on, right? So for example, what I can do is just go to File, Import, and then go to that folder. And that was ball bounce. So I'm gonna bring in this one, 0. So I'm gonna turn image sequence off and just bring in the 0 frame and put that down here. And then I'm gonna locate it right here. All right. Now, when you bring in a single image, it's going to bring it in the length of your entire project, right? So it's going to be a 1:03" length. So what we need to do with this is trim it down a little bit. So what you want to do is make sure you're all the way to the left on your scale for the timeline. And when you hover over the end part of this, you'll get little double arrows that show up. You can take that and drag it all the way over, and you can actually snap it to a point if you need to. So I'm just going to take actually these 2. If you hit Shift, you can select 2 of them at a time. I'm selecting both of those, and I'm just going to drag it over. And then this one, I'm just going to drag, and as I'm dragging, I'm hitting Shift so it snaps right to the beginning of this frame. So now I have this thing kind of just sitting still, and then as I hit the animation, it will start to move, right? So effectively, I'm able to add a little more time to this, a little bit of a pause before the action happens, right? So then similarly with the end part of this, I'm going to import the end of it. There we go. And I'll put that down here below it. And I'm just going to crop this. Again, what I'm doing is just grabbing the front of this composition with little arrows, moving it over, and then grabbing the end of the composition and moving it over here. All right. Let's Let's move this one out of the way a little bit. So now what I have is still motion, goes through the animation, stops on that motion, and then clips into the next one, okay? So this is a way, again, with the image sequence, it's great because you can use those stills to your advantage as you're starting to lead things in and out, all right? So let's say we wanted to label this, right? Now that we've got this thing working, we've got some good space in between, I might actually make it a little bit longer. So I'm just gonna move this over, and I'm gonna grab these three. Again, I'm just selecting, using Shift to select all three of these, and then I can move those over like that. So now I've got quite a bit of time before the action starts and a little bit of fade out, which is good. So let's say I wanted to add a title to this. I'm just gonna call it Squash and Stretch. What you can do is add a text layer. So if you go up to Layer, New, and then Text, what's gonna happen is it's gonna automatically put in this red file, this red clip, and it's gonna give you a little cursor at the top. So what you wanna do right away is just start typing. So I'm just gonna call this Squash and Stretch, all right? Now here, what I can do is I can open up, let's see here. When you click out of the file and back into the file, it gives you this, and you can grab the move tool right here, and you can literally move it around where you want it to be, all right? So I'm gonna hover this a little bit below. I'm gonna click on my text tool again. I'm gonna select all this stuff here. And then on the right side, I can change the font. I can change the scale of the text. I can change a lot of those different elements coming through. Go back to my move tool, and I'm just gonna move this over somewhere in the middle, okay? So again, just like a still clip, this is gonna be the entirety of your sequence until you shorten it. So I'm just gonna take it and shorten it down here. So now this would kind of like come in, would disappear, and then the action would start. Maybe I'd have it move over a little bit. All right, so I'm gonna do this so it kind of fades in, fades out. So now I have label that comes up, label disappears, action starts, and I get a little bit of time outside of it. So from here, what I wanted to talk a little bit about is this idea of using some keyframes. So After Effects has the ability to do keyframes, just like in Cinema 4D, where you can have transitions happen or have text fade in and fade out. So let's say that this text is a little bit too harsh, just kind of coming in. I'd rather have it fade in and fade out. What I can do is I can add a keyframe. So with each one of these layers, I can open it up and I can transform, right? So if I open transform, I have position, scale, rotation, opacity. Opacity is probably the one that I would keyframe the most, that I use the most. And the way that keyframes work in After Effects is a little bit different than in Cinema. What you do with this is you turn the keyframes on at a point where you're at. So let's say right here, turn this little button, so it looks like a little stopwatch, you just turn it on. It automatically puts a little keyframe down here. It looks like a little blue check, a little blue diamond. And then it is going to sort of move through, and if I move forward and I do something, I change it, it's going to put another keyframe in. So I'm just gonna go back. If you hit the Shift key, you can snap it to where the keyframe is. And I'm just gonna take this from 100% opacity down to 0, all right? So it's gonna maintain that, it's gonna record that 0. I'm gonna move forward in the timeline a little bit. And if you wanna zoom in, you can just drag the mountain range scale tool over so you can see your zoom in on that part of the project. And now I'm gonna go from 0 to 100, all right? So what I have is it'll interpret that in between. It's going from nothing, and then it's fading into that. Actually, what I wanna do here is have this keyframe you can move them as well. So I'm just going to shift and snap it to the beginning of this part of the composition. So now I have a little bit of fade in. And then similarly, if I wanted to fade out, what I would want to do is put another keyframe in right here at 100%. And what you can do there is this little button here allows you to add a keyframe. So add a keyframe here. Now I have 100% between these two. And then if I hit shift and go to the end of it, it's going to go right to the end of my, my clip. And then I can make this down to 0, okay? So essentially I'm creating this kind of ramp. I'm ramping up and then I'm ramping out for that sort of transition, okay? So you can do this with movement. You can do this with anything that's under here that has a little keyframe button. You can create that sort of transitional. So the same thing would be true if I wanted to have some sort of like cross dissolve, let's say from one clip into another one, right? So let's close this and let's go to this scene, right? So in this scene, I've got this ball that kind of comes in, comes out, and then there's a lot of like dead time at the end of it. So what I could do is use this dead time to actually have it kind of crossfade from one into the next. So in a similar way, what I want to do is select this clip, make sure it's highlighted. I'm going to drop down the menu, and I'm going to open up transform, and then the same thing. What I'm going to do here is I'm at 100%, so I'm going to click the opacity keyframe. It's going to drop a little keyframe in. I'm going to move my timeline forward and hit shift so it snaps to the end. And then I'm just going to drop this down to 0. So now what I have is sort of the ball moving out, and then it dissolves into the one below. So basically what's happening is I have this frame below, right? So it's going to pick up what's underneath of it, right? So because this one is on top and this one is below, it's going transparent, and that's allowing you to see the one beneath it. So if I didn't have anything under here, like if this was shorter, this transition would simply fade to black, right? And so that's how you could fade to black as well. If you wanted to have this transition out, it could go to black, and then the next one sort of pops up. So that would be a possibility. In this case, though, I'm going to bring this back out. So now I have this transition overall. Okay. And then lastly, I do think having some sort of beginning transition is always helpful. So in this case, I'm going to select this top one, and I will add a keyframe here too. So I'm just going to click a keyframe because I've already started that keyframe line. I'm going to make this 0. I'm going to move forward a little bit, and I'm going to make it 100. All right. So now what I have is a subtle fade in. Action happens, fades out into the next one, and on to the next scene. All right. Any questions about that so far? Definitely it's something that you'll want to refer back to when you're working on this project. But essentially, the way that you think about using After Effects, I like to think about it as almost like creating a staircase, right? So you're creating this type of composition that you're slowly revealing the layer upon layer upon layer of each one of your sequences to eventually, have a full completed sort of scene, all right? So at any time as well, what you can do is, let's say I really like this squash and stretch transition, the text transition here. I can just simply copy this and paste it. So now I have this squash and stretch, and I can put it anywhere in my composition. I can put it over here, right? So in this case, what I could do is have this And on this one, I could just go up to text and call it something else. All right, there we go. So once you've created one of these text transitions, you can easily have it be something else as well. Okay, so I've just copied and pasted. It also copies and pastes the keyframes, which is really cool. And that's just a quick way that you can sort of develop the kind of overarching sort of scene. All right. I don't know if I have any audio on this computer, but let me talk about that a little bit. Let me see if what we might have on here. It's probably just a bunch of sound effects. I don't know. All right. Oh, that sounds pretty good. I think we'll definitely use Dreamland. All right, I don't know. Let's see, can I just drag this in here? Yes, okay, you can just drag files into here, which is great. Let's talk a little bit about audio quickly, and then we'll talk about rendering this out. So basically audio is kind of the same sort of thing. You can just drop it in. I usually put it at the bottom of my sequence or the top of my sequence because I know it's got to cover the entire project. And with this, same sort of thing with keyframing. You can open up the audio and you can keyframe the levels, right? So what I would do with this is probably add 0, add a keyframe. I would drop this down to negative whatever it does, 192 negative decibels, all right? I'd move forward in the timeline, and then I would bring this probably just up to 0. You can click and type as well. 0 is kind of like the middle of the road. So this should then fade in. We can actually, if it's too quick of a fade, we can drag this out further. At any time, you can move your keyframes around to adjust them. There we go. Let's move that out. So there's our audio in. Okay. And actually, I think the reason that this is like that is because negative 100 and it's probably way too low. Let's just bring this up. Negative 24. There we go. That's a better transition. There's too much of a jump to go from that far up to down. So I've got that transitioning at the end of my sequence here. I'm going to let this go to black, and then I'm going to add a keyframe here and let this go out. And we should be good. All right, so now I've got this thing ending, music fades out, and end clip, I'm done. All right, so I've got my whole sequence. I've got some text, I've got some audio, I've got some transitions, and now I want to render this out. Okay, so before you go to render, we want to clean this up a little bit. So first of all, I've got all this dead space at the end of my scene, right? You don't want to render out a video and just have it run forever at the end. It's going to make your file longer, and it's going to be annoying, especially if you want to loop it around and stuff. So figure out what a comfortable transition out is. Definitely have a little bit of title, a little bit of something to end your sequence so people know that they're done, right? We like to know that we're finished watching something. So I'm going to give a little bit of space past here. And then I'm just going to take this top menu, the work area end, right? I'm just going to grab this when the arrow shows up, and I'm going to drag it over. As I'm dragging, I'm going to hit shift and snap it to the playhead where I'm at right here, okay? That's going to shorten my work area overall. And what I want to do now is go to composition, and trim comp to work area, okay? So what that will do is it'll trim everything down to the 24 seconds that I've done for this animation, right? So I've got all my sequences in, everything is looking good, and now I can render it. So in order to render it, what I'm gonna do is go to composition. Well, first of all, I wanna make sure you save this. So let's save it. Make sure you save it in your folder. All right. And then we'll go to composition. And what we're going to use is called Media Encoder. So Media Encoder allows you to choose any kind of format. So if you want to send this to Vimeo, if you want to send it to YouTube, if you want to make it good so it can play well on Instagram, any of that sort of stuff, you can select on Media Encoder. So Media Encoder should pop up. Hopefully it's popping up. Oh, here it comes. My impatientness. It's never been opened on this machine before, so it's going to take a minute. Once Media Encoder pops up, it sometimes takes a minute for the file to show, but you should be able to see it's starting to load in all the system presets, which is great. And then eventually you will get your project. It's doing a little bit of homework. Hopefully the project will pop up. There we go. Okay. So once your project shows up here, it'll show the output file, batch rate, everything like that. Overall, what you want to do is you can, under system presets, let's see. Social media, there's Facebook, Twitter, Vimeo, YouTube. I'm just going to use this YouTube one. So it's going to be the size that we want. It's a 1080, right? It's going to be compressed well, so I can put it on YouTube if I wanted to. So I'm just going to double click this. All right. Actually, let's see, I drag it. All right, yeah, so you drag and drop it into your preset area, and then that'll show up here. What you want to do next is choose a new path, because it's going to create some, pathway that Adobe likes to do. I'm just going to put it in my 12 principles folder, and I'm going to call it test video 1. I'll call it 12p underscore test video 1, so I know what it is. Okay, you definitely want it to save out as an MP4, all right, and just hit save. And then, even though you hit save, it doesn't mean it's saving. You actually have to hit this play button, okay? So what it's gonna do is kind of like, just like when we were rendering in Cinema 4D, it's gonna render each frame by frame by frame to create the video with all those transitions and audio and everything on top of it. So once you click play, this could take a little while. It could easily take, 10, 15 minutes or so. I guarantee that the machines in the classroom are going to render a lot faster than your laptop will. So that's something to consider as well. It's actually rendering pretty fast, which is good. And then once it's done, you can just source it in your file, and it's ready for you to view. So let's go to our documents, control principles, and we should have, here we go. Here's our folder, and we can play our video, audio, and everything. Titles. That's it. All right. So that is the very basics of using After Effects.